you play the drum. That's like tune drum.
Get out.
Say what?
Jai Sachinandana Surami Vandana Mahaya Vandana Jai Sachinandana Surami
Jai
Yashomati Nandana Brajavara Nagara Yashomati Nandana Brajavara Nagara Yashomati Nandana Brajavara
Sabara Bhagati Vinodasaya
Who's the movie star?
You.
Successful, I guess.
Yeah. Seemed like it.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajanulambita Bhujo Kamadavaratu Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dijavaro Yugodharma Paro Vande Jagat Priyakaro Paranabhataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sorito Gaurarai Pushpabandho Chito Sandho Dhamuno Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charano Sako Sukaro Paramanando Sundaro Subhadapyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Shri Guru Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai Shri Shri Gaurada Madhava Ki Jai Om Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Guru Premanande Good evening. So we're continuing our discussion on the nature of Bhava Bhakti, and we discussed several verses explaining the rarity of its attainment, how it is the goal of sadhana bhakti, and in our last discussion, I believe we heard the definition of Bhava Bhakti. Bhava Bhakti is the second after sadhana bhakti of three forms, expressions of bhakti. Third, of course, is prema bhakti, and we heard that bhava is a ray of the sun of prema, dawning in the heart of the devotee. We had some extensive discussion of that. What comes next in the chapter, now we're in the chapter on Bhava Bhakti since it has been defined, we come to the next section in which it describes how Bhava Bhakti is attained. Of course, we know already it's attained by sadhana bhakti. But here, Rupa Swami says that it's attained in two ways. Sadhanani niveshena. Always hard for me to pronounce that word. And prasadenati danyanam. These are two words from his text here that describe the two ways in which this Bhava Bhakti is attained. One, by sadhana, then two, by here danya, ati danyanam, so by mercy. He will go on to explain that the way of sadhana and the way of attaining through mercy pertain to two types of bhakti, that is, Vaidhi Bhakti and Raga Bhakti. So each has its own bhava. Furthermore, he will go on to explain that with regard to the attainment by mercy, that it can be attained by the mercy of Bhagavan or by the mercy of a devotee. With regard to Krishna's mercy, it comes in three forms. In the form of his giving a verbal blessing, the form of his just being by his presence, and also by way of his making that bhava manifest in the heart without appearing before the devotee, without saying anything. So by words, by presence, and from within the heart. And so we have two types of bhakti, Raga Bhakti, Vaidhi Bhakti. We have two means of attaining rati or bhava, by mercy or by sadhana. With regard to mercy, there are two types, by the Lord or by Bhagavan. With regard to the Lord's mercy, there comes in three different ways. And here we find in this verse that with regard to the two basic distinctions in terms of how this rati is attained, sadhana and mercy, Rupa Goswami says that the way of sadhana is the norm, and the way by mercy is rare, or the exception. Sometimes devotees wonder about this. Where's the division between the mercy and the sadhana? Because obviously the sadhana requires mercy as well. And Rupa Goswami will give examples for all of these divisions that we've discussed, mentioned, I should say. But the basic difference between the way of mercy and the way of sadhana, the latter, again, being the norm and the form of being rare, is that without any sadhana, they appear in one, or so it would appear. Because he also makes the point, I think twice in this section, that here he says, Ati Danyanam, with regard to Danyanam, or great, Ati means great, or excessive favor, grace. He says, persons become Ati Danyanam by prior association. So, by apparently no sadhana, but at the same time by prior association, so it means by previous lifetimes. Whether they did sadhana then or not, we can say, But the basic idea is that without any appearance of sadhana per se, a great person, a person attains bhava. But again, previous lives are in play also. So that just serves to emphasize the point that sadhana is the norm, and we should not lead our life in devotional service based on the idea that we will attain perfection by mercy any more than we should lead our life with the idea that we will win the lottery and that will solve our problems and we shouldn't work in the meantime. That would be quite foolish. So sadhana is the norm. And about the sadhana, he says here, sadhana viniveshena. So it means to be absorbed in sadhana. So by absorption in sadhana, this is possible. And absorption in sadhana, all the commentators have said, refers to a stage in bhakti that we emphasize often as the inner goal, that is nishtha. This is indeed what Mahaprabhu himself has said in Shikshastakam in the third verse, where this stage of nishtha, firm faith, conviction, commitment, as we discussed it somewhere, we were discussing this, I guess maybe in Hillsborough. Yeah, now I recall. That Mahaprabhu has prefaced his, well, Krishnadas Kaviraj prefaces the mention of the verse in succession, the third verse of Shikshastakam, with words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through his pen that more or less say and emphasize that the chanting, which is the method, as we know, to his madness, Nam Sankirtan, his divine madness, chanting with this verse worn really as a garland around one's neck. Krishnadas makes this point in Chaitanya Charitamrita also. I had mentioned in our discussion previously in Hillsborough that the third verse of Shikshastakam, important as it is, let's recite it. Trinadapi sunichena tarodapi savishnuna amanya manaveda kirtanya sadahari. So I noticed one person in the room didn't know, so all of you are a failure. You have not taught, if you didn't know, so find out who that is and teach. I'll give you a hint, her, that verse. You teach her. So, important verse. I mentioned that it appears twice in Chaitanya Charitamrita, at the end, of course, where the Shikshastakam is being explained, and from the mouth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in speaking to Raghunath Das Goswami, who asked for the opportunity, asked Sarup Damodar, under whose care he was placed, the opportunity to hear directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu something, some direct instruction. Mahaprabhu avoided it, as I mentioned, because not that he wanted to hold anything back from Raghunath Das Goswami, but because he felt that Sarup Damodar knew more than him. Sarup Damodar is thought to be one of the intimate associates of Radha in Krishna Lila, sometimes described as Lalita, sometimes as Vishaka. These are two group leaders who are, in the sense that they're qualified to be group leaders that defer to Radha and place themselves under her leadership. So they know very much about her moods, and so it was when Mahaprabhu came to Puri, he ended up ultimately in their hands with Gadadhar fading into the background a little bit, as under the coaching and good guidance of Sarup and Rai Ramananda, full bhava and person of Radha manifest in him. So Radha had to take a diminished position, remaining at the Tota Gopinath temple in the service of Radha Gopinath there. A diminished position of wholeness, really, yes, because by doing that, he made possible Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ideal, made it possible for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to realize his ideal. Radha is the Radha of the Gaur Leela. So, he has to step. She was reluctant to give him what he wanted. He had to steal it. He had to. She was concerned what it will do to him. And of course, she's also concerned that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, and everybody knows that. She doesn't know. She may be pushy a little bit with Krishna, but otherwise not. Not to push herself in the forward, in the limelight of everyone, and just see, I control Krishna, and this is my position. This is not at all her sentiment, although she does. She's a little huffy. And Krishna likes that very much, of course. So, in order for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to actually walk into her bhava, Gadadhar had to step a little to the background, and he had to get the blessings, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Swarup Damodar, Raghunath, and Roy Raghunandan. So, as I mentioned, he did not avoid, because it was more than once requested by Raghunath Das of Swarup Damodar that could you ask Prabhu, the great Mahaprabhu, if I could have his darshan and get some personal instruction from him. I've come all this way, as he did, stealing through the night and through the farmlands and forests and the back roads to arrive at Puri, to avoid going on the main road where he felt he might be captured by his parents and guardians and dragged back from his madness. So with great difficulty, he went that distance. And so, you want to hear something directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu held back and resisted, and this is why. Not because he didn't want, but he was going to hold something back from Raghunath Das Goswami, but as I say, he felt, Swarup knows more than I. I'm here to learn from him. I'm here to get his blessing. But he did say something to him finally, and they were very basic but very important instructions. Don't eat fancy foods, don't wear fancy clothes, don't hear the gossip, and don't engage in gossip and spreading it yourself. Always think of Radha and Krishna in your mind, and Swarup will tell you the rest, he said. And then he said, Pranadapi Sanechena. So this is the second place, a very important, very prominent place, that it appears in Chaitanya Charitamrita as an instruction by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself to Raghunath Das Goswami, who is thought to be the Prayojan Tattva Acharya. So his writings, which came later, largely, of course, his notes about his life in the presence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Puri, and those of Swarup Damodar are the basis of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas had those valuable notes. Somehow he got them. He had received the blessing from Nityananda Prabhu to go to Vrindavan, order really, go to Vrindavan, and all your ambitions will be fulfilled there. In the night, in a dream, Nityananda came with the Dwadasa Gopals in a dream, giving him blessing, chanting Krishna, Krishna, and wearing peacock feathers and carrying sticks and flutes and horns, and he had this extraordinary vision, and he awoke and immediately left for Vrindavan. But somehow he had these notes with them, or he got them somehow or other. And a diary of serfdom, which is not available now. It's nowhere to be found. In the notes of Raghunath Das Goswami. At any rate, later Das Goswami, after the passing of Mahaprabhu and Srupdamar, he went to Vrindavan, and there he, in due course, he had to shelter a group, Sanatan, and he was quite young, but after their passing, he remained on. And on the banks of the Radhakund, he wrote some very elevated literatures, emphasizing the prayojan, the highest ideal of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in poetry, and really in trance, where he would enter into the trance and come back and write a verse about it. So, a very exalted person, and we might think that Mahaprabhu would give him some very esoteric teaching, but he told him something about the interim goal and how important it is. As Krishnadas himself writes about this, he exclaims, very boldly makes a statement, this verse of Shikshastakam about Nishta is so nice, so, he thinks it's so nice and beautiful, and some people think, oh, I wanted to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava and attain the Radha Prem. And then I heard this verse of Shikshastakam, be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, and I knew it was not possible. So I gave it up. But to the ears of Krishnadas, it's like nectar. These are the ornaments of the devotee, fourfold ornaments: humility, tolerance, expecting no honor, giving honor to others. And it brings one into real experiential spiritual life, consistently. Exclaiming about this verse, he says, this verse, everything is there. So much teaching to get there, so much philosophy to get there. Nishta involves engaging the intellect fully, and arriving there, the intellect is not needed too much anymore. There's consistency in bhakti, it's little intelligence driven, entering to ruchi, little intelligence is little functioning there, but taste is carrying, and then into asakti, attachment. And these three, nishta, ruchi, asakti, this is where you want to go. Getting to nishta, ruchi, asakti, and bhav, the point is they will come readily. Again, it's really a stage of deeply experiential spiritual life, even though it is within the realm of sadhana, and the modes of nature are still have a play, some influence on the devotee, but not sufficient influence to derail his or her practice, consistent practice, which keeps them in touch with the consistent experience. It's something like it's one thing to be on the sun planet and in the sun, and another thing to be moving to the west fast enough that it always remains in vision, and gradually getting closer as we go around and round and round. If you go fast enough to the west, you'll always be in the rays of the sun, something like this. This is Nishta. And it is experiential. In the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam, I believe Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a verse from there in describing Nishta, wherein it's mentioned that sleep and distraction, two of the five, I guess, kind of mental conditions that are have to be overcome to be fully situated in that stage, to fall asleep during the practice. And I don't know, though, sometimes if all of those devotees of ancient times worked as hard as I saw some Prabhupada's disciples. Stand up, not to fall asleep during the class, and keel over. Because they were told, you know, you should only sleeping more than 6 hours is, something like that. Of course, the Prabhupada said in the Gita 6 or 7, just for your information. And when he formed the League of Devotees, which was before he formed ISKCON, his first effort to form an institution, which didn't get too far, but he had all his standards and so forth written out, and he had one disciple, what was his name? Acharya. And there his policy was everyone will attend the Mangalarti, 4:30 and so on and so forth, and hear the Bhagavatam class in the morning and take the prasad and so on. And after lunch, and they would sleep from 10 o'clock till 4. And 4:30 would be arti. Then after lunch they could sleep for 2 hours. So he had an 8-hour program in that group there. 6 to 8, something like that. But some of them were like 4.5, 5, and sleep was thought to be pretty bad. So but then sometimes they passed out while driving. And I don't think that was like what Vishwanath Thakur is talking about. Or sleep starvation, I should say, is not the way to attain Nishta. Anyway, so there's a verse in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, I forget the verse, but he cites it, and he mentions sleep and distraction being gone. And Vishwanath comments that with the absence of these, the theoretical person of Krishna becomes a real and experiential person. So one can have the darshan of Krishna in this stage. So again, you gather all this theory with intelligence and use your head to soften your heart, and absorption in sadhana, complete absorption in sadhana. This is nishta, and therefore it's experiential, powerful. So that is what the commentators have emphasized here with regard to the idea that rati or bhava can be attained by sadhana, not just by any kind of sadhana, but by sadhana that comes to nishta, which will readily beget ruchi and asakti. So this is then, therefore, a very useful way to look at our path to make a focus on an interim goal. Really, it's good to know the theory of the ideal and so forth, but it will naturally manifest within the heart. You don't actually have to memorize all the terms and know all the Sanskrit and so forth. But it's very helpful to hear the philosophy, hear the ideal, hear about something about the higher stages and so forth. And we're talking about a higher stage than anyone in the room has attained. So, Ishta. People don't want to stop there, they want to go back. But it's, if you understand it properly, it's pretty much like the Jivan Mukta stage in Gyan. Karma is suspended. We say, of course, that you don't get the karma that you're supposed to get. Many years ago, in Navadvip, I dove into the Ganges head first, and the water was shallow, and so my head went in, and my head went into my neck. It was quite should have died from that. Bathing in some other river for no other reason than swimming. But by the grace of my guru, I was in Navadvip, in Mayapur, and bathing in the Ganges. I got some reaction, and I'm still suffering from that. It helps to keep one humble. We call it Krishna. Sometimes we used to in this and call it Krishna karma, something like what was due was one thing, what you got is something else. Krishna's arrangement. In Nishta is said that the anarthas that arise from good karma and bad karma. Anarthas arise from good karma, from bad karma, from what else? From aparad, from within the context of bhakti. Anarthas will arise, you may become more balanced person. Doesn't usually happen, but you should become a more balanced person. And you may get some reputation, for example. And so he's a big, important devotee. And then if you get attracted to those waves, they're called, then you, rather than cultivating the plant of bhakti, you're cultivating the weed. So these types of anarthas can come. So different types, and the eradication of them, as we know, is gradual. But the anarthas arising from good and bad karma are thought to be eradicated. I don't know what term he uses, I forget. At Nishta. Complete.
Absolute.
And
different degrees.
After complete comes absolute and something after that.
Yeah.
Yantika or something. Of course, that means that bhava, then completely. All having completed the stage of sadhana, all the karmic influences is removed entirely, but to a large extent. I compared it here to the Jivan Mukta stage in Gyan, where karma is still present for them, their prabdha karma, because without bhakti, the prabdha karma cannot be. What was the term we heard today? Shamsaki, your friend, wanted. What was she going to do with karma? Heal karma or something? A lot of ideas out there. Has a friend that does a milk customer that does karmic healing. So there's no eradication of karmic influence, and it's possible by bhakti in all of its stages. So it is, in two basic senses, it's in unmanifest stage and a manifest stage. Within the unmanifest stage, there are stages as well, but these are two basic categories, parabdha and aparabdha. So bhakti can eradicate karma at all, both the parabdha and the aparabdha, both the manifest and the unmanifest. Whereas gyan, see, karma originates with ignorance, avidya. So gyan uproots the ignorance. So that's the end of karma, when you get to gyan. But the karma that's already in place, that's another thing. It's like if you catch a cold, okay, well, there's nothing you can do about it now. You just have to kind of wait for it to pass. So in the Jivan Mukta stage in the Gyan Marg, then the Prabdha karma is playing itself out. And he's witnessing and not getting involved and getting plugged in. He has illumination, so ignorance of attachment is uprooted. But in bhakti, even the prabdha karma is removed or altered to a state that Krishna gives a certain type of karma. It's a very different idea. The term Jivan Mukta is also used in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's a nice verse there. What does Rupa Goswami say? Karmana manasa gira. Jivan mukta suchate. I forget the whole verse, but karma is the essence of karmana manasa gira. When the karma, when one's actions, one's mind, and one's intelligence, words, but fully absorbed in Krishna service. Jivan mukta suchate. These are jivan mukta. Absorption in Krishna. So this is what we're talking about here in sadhana bhakti. Absorption in sadhana refers to sadhana bhakti. One who is fully absorbed in sadhana bhakti, who is really a sadhaka. I've said before that we get, at the time of initiation, as Mahaprabhu taught to Sanatana Prabhu, at the time of initiation we get a sadhaka deha, and it's a work, a body of work in progress. And so our senses, which the bodies consist of, are in touch with sense objects, and sometimes for their own purposes or mentally conceived purposes that correspond with my mental conception of self, and not with my self as a sadhaka. And sometimes our senses are in touch with sense objects for the purpose of serving Krishna, and with the ego of being a sadhaka. And so there's this mixture. It's like similar to the manifestation of the Leela within the world, where there's a mixture. There's a meeting ground, actually. Therefore, there are some demons in Krishna Leela and so forth. And there seems to be some adverse elements and so forth. So, and we should look at it like that. The appearance of Krishna in the world, as it's talked about, corresponds with the appearance of Krishna in the world of our lives, our hearts. His janma. This is like he's born many places, many times, in many hearts. And the medium is the diksha. The initiation enters the heart. And so, when the sadhaka deha is perfected, if you will, or let's say it's not perfected, but it is no longer a mixture. It still needs development, but in Nishta, the point is that the senses are not in touch with sense objects for any other purpose than to serve Krishna, to engage in bhakti, to foster that which my life is orbiting around, the sadhana. So, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami said, Jivan Mukta Sushta. We have our own Jivan Muktas. And they are those whose Karmana Manasa Gira, I think it says. It means their intelligence. So their bodies means their work, karma, their action, manasa, their minds, and their intelligence. Intelligence, particularly, as I mentioned, pertains to the stage of Nishta. Inasmuch, let's say, for example, that the Nishta stage is described in the Bhagavatam as being what Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So, the stage in which inauspicious things are almost eradicated, and one is characterized by regularly Nityam Bhagavata Seva, serving the Bhagavatam, which comes in two forms, of course, the person Bhagavatam and the book Bhagavatam. But Bhagavatam is the commentary on the sutras, which are the kind of the logic of all the revealed sound of all the sacred texts. So it requires all of your brain, all of your intelligence to study the Bhagavatam. Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Seva Bhagavati Tamashloka Bhakti Bhagavati Naishtiki. Naishtiki means Nishta. Srinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hriyantastu Ebhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. First comes Anartana Vritti Vidunoti Suritsatam. That's the Prayeshu. Then this stage, Nishta. And Tara Rajastamo Bhava Kamalovaya Jaichitaitara Nabhidam Stitam Satve Prasidati. from there from Nishta he actually, where the modes may still be, not have released one is not bound by them to act not, according to their influence. It's a peculiar kind of a situation. They're there, but they're not powerful enough to derail the sadhaka's practice and focus and bhakti. So they may show up in other forms of, let's say, for example, in Nishta, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has talked about two types of Nishta. Nishta that is directly related to bhakti, and Nishta that is related to things that are related to bhakti. And they come up in Mahaprabhu's verse also. Trinada pisa nichena taroda pisa ishtana amanina manadina kirtaniya sadhari. So kirtaniya sadhari means to be always chanting the name, literally. So that would be fixed in bhakti herself, so to speak. That which is overtly and directly bhakti. And then to be fixed up in those things that are favorable to bhakti, like humility, gratitude, kindness, jivadoya, kindness to others. These are the things that are mentioned in in Mahaprabhu's verse. So it is possible that someone could be in Nishta, but because of the influence of the modes, they could be a little grumpy or something, or not always polite, and it might be not seem to be thankful or something. So the modes are there, influencing, and this is showing up in this way, but they're not able to derail his or her practice. And of course, that person in Ishta, who may be a little rough on the edges in some ways, will nonetheless, of course, understand the tattva. This is an important point. He'll understand the tattva. The intermediate devotee, similar idea, with deep faith, as described by Rupa Goswami, is familiar with the argument. He cannot maybe make all the argument and effectively defeat others, but he or she knows, there's enough feeling for it to know, that's right, that doesn't sound right. Like that. So I just say this because there are people that are like chanting 16 rounds and they're kind of mean, and that's not who I'm talking about, because they're mean and they're very sectarian, and we see sometimes when they don't understand the teaching, they commit Vaishnava aparad, and all in the name of being very strict and staunch and so forth. No, in Nishta there should be some softening of the heart, because we're coming in touch with the reality of our finiteness in the face of the finite, infinite. And as I said, in this stage, rules and regulations become realizations, and so the rules may be explained in different ways, dynamically, according to time and circumstance, and draw out the implications of them, and so on and so forth, rather than just something that you have memorized and repeated, and now you think you've got it, something like that. So it's a deeply experiential stage. And of course, with regard to these two types of nishta or steadiness in relation to things that are favorable to bhakti and bhakti herself directly, there may be some rare instance, I want to say, where, as I have, the bhakti may be steady, but the other steadiness with regard to its favorable bhakti, and those qualities may not be there, but generally they will be. And it is possible, on the other hand, to be steady with regard to those things that are favorable to bhakti and not have steadiness in bhakti. But Mahaprabhu has put them together and he has really mandated that both of them need to be in place. He has said in his verse that by putting the things that are favorable to bhakti in place in terms of being steady in those, then one can be steady in relation to bhakti herself. And then one can, and this is the point as I was beginning, that Krishnadas Kaviraj has made, speaking on behalf of Mahaprabhu through his pen as he prefaces, introducing this third verse of the Shikshastakam. There he says that Mahaprabhu said and felt that by chanting in this way, absorbed in sadhana, one will very quickly get praying. This is the way to get praying. The other thing I was saying about Krishnadas is how he so much appreciated this verse when he heard it, when he wrote it again in Chaitanya Charitamrita and said, and Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Das Goswami, Trinadapi Samichena Tavarodapi Seshana Amanina Manadina Kirtaniya Sadari, and then with great joy and enthusiasm and love for the implications of this verse, he says, listen everyone, all devotees, take this verse and wear it like a garland around your neck and chant the holy name. Tell it everywhere. It magnifies this verse. He broadcasts it really in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And here it comes again in Rupa Goswami's description of how we will attain rati, the normal way, the standard way, by sadhana. As I said earlier, we may wonder sometimes, well, what is the sadhana and where does the mercy leave off? Where does the sadhana begin? So again, mercy means by mercy of the devotee or the mercy of Krishna, it means without any sadhana that we can see. Maybe by previous life, certainly some association is there in what they did in that life, but at least in this life it appears that they just suddenly, or there are examples. The example of Prahlad is there. Let's look at that. With regard to the mercy of a devotee, Narada was merciful to him, and he spoke the Bhagavatam to his mother when his mother was pregnant, with the intention to bless the child, who was the son of Hiranyakasipu, who was a problem. And so the demigods were concerned the son would be a problem. The demigods wanted to abort him. And of course, Narada had a different approach and turned him into a bhakta within the womb. His previous life is there also, how he observed the Ekadasi in the temple with a working lady, an abandoned temple. Anyway, it gives him some background, some background with bhakti. It's a long story there. But they had gone to have union in an old, in the forest, an old abandoned temple, Vishnu. They argued and never went forward, and they stayed up the whole night arguing. So they stayed up in the Vishnu temple all night on Ekadasi. So got some sukriti for that. But anyway, there's some past, it would appear, to those who attained by mercy. But mercy without practice, and conversely, mercy, practice along with mercy. So the example of a devotee in Vaidhi Bhakti who attained rati by sadhana is Narada. and he came in the association of the Bhakti Vedantas, as Prabhupada refers to them. Some devotees would take shelter at Nard's mother's house, maidservant. She was a maidservant. She was a mother without a husband and son, and they didn't discriminate. They came there. They stayed for 4 months, recited the Bhagavatam. They gave Nard permission to take the remnants of their food and told him this is Mahaprasad, and gave him the blessing to practice and so forth. But this is an example of Nard, someone who attained by sadhana. So it's not without any mercy, but we know in the verses where Nard describes his life, he describes the stage of Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, and Prem, and going through them all. So, sadhana is not without any mercy, obviously, and attained by mercy is without any apparent sadhana. But again, that is the rare, and we don't live our life without working with the idea that it's possible to win the lottery. So we don't. I hear the devotees sometimes say, "I'm banking on the Kripa Siddhi." We should bank on them by sadhana, some effort. I've often said before, we should make effort in bhakti as if it was entirely dependent upon effort, while full knowing, without grace, it's not possible. Make that kind of effort. Certainly, here this Rupa Shakti is not blind. Be very, very, very generous. Bless those with effort. Look at Mother Yashoda. She's blessed with being able to do the impossible, to tie Krishna up with only the ribbon from her hair. When she made an effort. What was her effort? She tried to gather all the rope in Vrindavan. They said the ladies were looking over the wall and throwing rope. Get more, get more. And it said that the cowards, when they have nothing to do, they make rope. It's so useful. So the implication is something like all the rope in Vrindavan was gathered and thrown over the wall and tied together to her original blue ribbon in her hair. And still he could not be tied. But the point here is the measure of the effort is the length of that rope and the tying it together. Of course, her effort was based on the idea that Krishna was going to run away from home. She didn't tie him up to chastise him, but that's how it came off. That's another thing. Another part of the story, but out of affection for him. But effort, and that effort, he saw that effort in her perspiring, tying the ropes together, trying to find it, and he let her, and she could suddenly do it with the original ribbon, and bound so strong by that ribbon that he could pull down the 2 Yamalarjuna trees and the ribbon would not break. He put the mortar between the 2 trees and pulled them down. How strong is his mercy for those who make little effort. Nehabikamanaashusti pratyavayamite svalpamopi asidama satrayate matovaya. When Krishna begins to speak about bhakti in the Gita in the 2nd chapter, first he tells Arjuna, you're not the body, gives him a little bit of knowledge. Rupa Swami says, a little bit of knowledge and detachment, it can be useful. They are not angas of bhakti, but they can be a little useful in the beginning. To get a little bit of that, theoretically, something like that. So we find that in the Gita. Krishna gives a little bit of theoretical knowledge. He says, it talks about the sat aspect of the self. You don't die. Nanyate yanamane sharire. You don't die when the body dies. He goes on about it for a number of verses. And then having concluded that section, some theoretical knowledge, he says, now we're going to get practical and do something about it. It's called yoga. And the very first verse out of his lotus mouth is this verse, Neha Vikramanashvasti Pratyavaya Vidite Spalpamapiya Siddhana Sutrati Matobharat. This is about bhakti. The chapter is about bhakti and nishkam karma. But he begins, let's get a full face of yoga here. We're going to talk about yoga, the means, talk about bhakti. Spalpamapiya Siddhana. Spalpam. Swalpam. A little bit, a little effort in this. It goes along. It would never go in vain. The implication by contrast is all effort in other paths unto themselves without bhakti will all go in vain. Whether it be karma marg, jnana marg, or yoga marg. In karma marg, it's particularly frightful because just a little mistake and everything is ruined. You could get the opposite result. That example is there in the Bhagavatam. He chanted he wanted an enemy of Indra, and he got Indra as his enemy or something like that. He got the opposite problem. Examples there to emphasize this point. And similarly in Gyan, but you go further in Gyan than you can in karma, but only to Jivan Mukta, and then Arui Kachena Parama Padam Tatapatantiat Dandati. All that effort in Gyan, and having gone so far, just to go back. Just to return to that. Because of what? There's a verse, third line, that's it.
The one you just said?
Yeah.
Aruya Kuchena Param Param.
Aruya Kuchena Param Param. Because of not having any regard for bhakti. Gyan is described as by Lord Brahma, after the Brahma Vimohan Leela, when he prayed to Krishna, is if you take two husks of rice and rub them together, and the rice all falls out, and then you take the husks and offer them. What is that? This is Gyan. In yoga also. So, meanwhile, by contrast, a little bit of bhakti, and you got Krishna's attention. You see, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And we know that. There are many talented people. And he was playing real good for free, some old song. There you go. About a street musician, by a great musician. She wrote a song about a street musician. And people passed him by because he wasn't on the TV screen. But he was playing real good for free. So it's not what you know always, and that's where this world works, but who you know. You can be what's that girl's name? That lady? She always reminds me of this principle.
There's many other.
This one in particular.
That one.
Topic.
The one who knows famous people.
Her father is famous.
Oh, Paris Hilton.
Paris Hilton. Yeah. You know, it's not what you know or even how you look. Who you know. So it is. If you know Krishna, and to know him is to love him is to know him, right? That means you know him. If you start doing bhakti, because you know something about Krishna. Otherwise, you don't know anything about Krishna. If you
start practically serving him, then you get his attention. And then what is your position? I mean, who is Krishna? If you know him, and of course you serve him by liking his devotees and serving them, those things that are dear to him, you get his attention. You just, well, you kind of won the lottery there. You met the right person. You know someone who counts, so to speak. So it's very powerful, is the idea. And with little effort in this, that will lead to eternal benefit. That doesn't mean we should only make a little effort. It's to say, if by a little effort, this is the result. What to speak of by a lot of, this is the logic used in that verse. The what to speak of logic. What is that called? What's a Bengali name for that kind of logic, or Sanskrit? I forget. I probably use the term, not to speak of, what to speak of. And I was always trying to think, is that actually an English phrase? What to speak of? Not to speak of.
More standard is not to speak.
You would say, what to speak of? So, anyway, it's a kind of, it's Sanskrit grammar, I guess it's a logic. That if by this, then what to speak of? By making a full effort, which is, he is so worthy of. Isn't it? So you just know a little bit about him. And in the sense of being a servant of his, and that you're spoken for, so to speak. He's one of mine, something like that. So how worthy then is he of more attention and effort and so forth. So this is the way, the standard way to bhava, to rati. Absorption in sadhana. This is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. It's a generous term. But when it comes to nishta, in the earlier stages it's more of a generous term. Nishta, then those senses are all engaged, the mind is engaged, intelligence is engaged. When sadhaka day is fully engaged, and it will develop then. And the modes of nature that are there, but can't influence, they can make you a little weird, I suppose, as I was saying, but not interfere with your bhakti. And the desires that are there, but are not allowed to fructify. They just can't, because it's just, they're like seeds that you're pouring the water of bhakti on, and you're just drowning them out, flooding them. They're there, but they can't sprout. This is actually a definition of one of the types of Mahabhagavatas mentioned by Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sandarbha. And he gives the example of Nard. We were talking about Nard as an example of one who attained rati or bhava by sadhana. And the story goes that, of course, in brief, he got the blessing of the Bhakti Vedantas to practice, and they left, and his mother died, and he burned the whole house down for the funeral, based on the knowledge he had, and so he walked off. And he was completely uninvolved in the world, not distracted by the world. That I talked about: sleep, distraction, apathy, emotional repression, and still kind of addiction to sense enjoyment. These are 5 things that have to be overcome to have fully attained the stage of Nishta. He had no distraction. And he ended up in the forest where he was practicing his mantra, and Krishna appeared before him. And then he disappeared. Krishna said, I've appeared to show you I'm real. And I disappeared because you're a kuyogi. You're not really a full yogi, you're attached to the forest. So, high sattva-guna. Lower modes of nature were really not functioning. in his life. He had a darshan, like in Nishta, you can have darshan. And this example is given Narada Muni of one type of Mahabharata. What's the Sanskrit term? Nirduta Kashai. Sridhar Maharaj described it something like the Bhagavat Praptadeha, the third type of Mahabhagavat. He has, it means, who's attained a spiritual body. The example of Jiva Goswami and Bhaktisiddhanta is Narada Muni. After he got his Vina, got his spiritual body from Krishna. He was the ward of the spiritual body. And then on the other end, there's three, so that's the third highest. And the first is Narada Muni again, in the stage which I described in the forest when he had darshan. And then Krishna disappeared just to drive him on, show him I'm here. Keep coming. And so, and then in the middle stage is the examples given of Sukadeva Goswami, who had no attachment. Sridhar Maharaj described the three anyway like this. The Bhagavat Praptadeha, he has 2 feet in the spiritual world, extends one here. The middle one has 1 foot here, extends one there. And the other one, arguably the Nishta one, has 2 feet here, but her eyes are always there.